I don't know what you think about revenge. I always used to believe that revenge is a sign of weakness, that strong people forgive while weak people seek revenge. I believed that with all my heart. My mother always told me, Emily, if someone hurts you, don't stoop to their level. Be the bigger person, forgive, and move on. I followed her advice my entire life. I forgave. I turned a blind eye. I pretended nothing was happening. I let other people trample my boundaries because I was afraid of seeming angry, vengeful, or unworthy. I was terrified that if I said no, people would stop loving me. So I endured. For years, for decades, I endured silently, quietly, unnoticed by everyone except myself. I endured until a mountain of pain accumulated inside me, pressing down on my chest, my lungs, my heart. Couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep. I couldn't look in the mirror without feeling disgust for myself for allowing others to control me. And one day, I realized that if I kept forgiving, I would die, not physically, but spiritually. I would turn into a shadow of a person, an empty shell that could only nod and smile while everything inside screamed in agony. That day, I decided I would no longer forgive. I decided I had the right to justice, and I found a way to reclaim my freedom. Not through shouting, not through scandal, not through physical confrontation, but through a quiet, cold, merciless revenge that no one would ever know about. A revenge that didn't require my presence. A revenge that worked through the law, through facts, through the system. I didn't lay a finger on anyone. I didn't break a single law. I just sent a letter. One single letter that destroyed the life of the woman who had been destroying mine. And I don't regret it. Not one bit. My name is Emily. I am 52 years old. I live in a small coastal town in Oregon, where it's quiet, peaceful, and smells of the sea. Here I found peace after years of hell. But that peace came at a high price. I lost 10 years of my life trying to please someone who never intended to accept me. I lost a husband who couldn't protect me. I lost myself because I spent too long being someone else. It was only when I realized I had nothing left to lose that I began to act. I started building a plan to reclaim everything that had been stolen from me. Slowly at first, then faster. Step by step. I grew up in a family where money was never the priority. My parents were teachers. We had a small house, an old car, and every evening we had dinner together around the same table. We weren't rich, but we were happy. My father loved to say, Emily, the most important thing in life is family. Money comes and goes, but love stays forever. I believed him. I married a man I loved, not his wallet. And I thought my mother-in-law would love me too, because I loved her son. I was wrong. I met Mark when I was 25. He worked as an engineer at a construction company, tall, strong, and kind. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He came up to me, smiled, and said, "You are the most beautiful woman in this room." I blushed. He asked me out and we started dating. A year later, he proposed. I said yes. I was happy. I thought my life was beginning anew. I thought I had finally found the family I had always wanted. But along with my husband, I got his mother. And she became my personal nightmare. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was a woman in her 60s with a sharp gaze and a cold smile. She lived in a large house on the outskirts of town, left to her by her late husband. She didn't work, but she lived extravagantly. She went to resorts every year, bought expensive things, drove a new car. I thought she had simply managed her money well. I didn't know that for years she had been cheating the tax authorities, hiding rental income and gifts. I didn't know she was stealing from the state and then spending that money on her whims. I found out much later. Too late. But when I did, I realized it was my chance. A chance for justice. A chance to reclaim what she had taken from me. In the early years of my marriage, I tried to build a relationship with her. I brought her flowers, helped with cleaning, invited her to dinners. She accepted everything but never thanked me. She looked at me as if I were a servant. She criticized my cooking, my clothes, my job. "Emily, you look tired. Don't you know how to rest? Mark, why does your wife work instead of staying home? A good wife should be at home." I gritted my teeth and smiled. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want Mark to choose between me and his mother. I didn't want to be the cause of their rift. I thought that if I was patient enough, she would change. But she didn't change. She only got worse. She started criticizing me in front of others. Friends, relatives, even my daughter. I stayed silent. I swallowed the insults. I buried my tears in my pillow when no one was watching. Mark noticed everything, but he did nothing. He would say, "Mom is just old and tired. She didn't mean to hurt you." Just don't pay attention. I tried not to pay attention. I tried to convince myself she wasn't that bad. I looked for the good in her, but I couldn't find it. Because his mother didn't want me to find anything good in her. She wanted me to feel worthless. She wanted me to know my place. She wanted me to leave. And when I discovered she was hiding income from the tax authorities, I realized I could use that. I could turn her greed against her. I could strike a blow she couldn't deflect. A blow that required no anger, no shouting, no forgiveness. A blow that worked through the law, through facts, through the system that protects honest people and punishes fraudsters. I decided I would be her punishment. But I would do it quietly so no one would ever know who was truly behind her downfall. I would become a ghost who destroyed her life, and she would never find out who did it. I started gathering information. It wasn't easy. I didn't have access to her bank accounts or tax returns, but I had access to her house. I visited often when she was out for meetings. I would go into her study, where she kept her documents. I found her old tax returns, bank statements, rental contracts. I photographed every page. I took pictures with my phone, saved them to a flash drive, and hid them in a secure place. I did this slowly, cautiously, but persistently. After several months, I had collected enough evidence to destroy her. Proof that she had evaded taxes for 10 years, that she had hidden rental income, received benefits she wasn't entitled to, and spent money as if it belonged only to her. I knew the tax authorities didn't forgive such things. I knew she faced a huge fine and possibly criminal prosecution. And I knew I would be the one to push her into that abyss. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with the simple sense that it was the right thing to do. The only way to protect myself and my daughter from her poison. I wrote an anonymous letter. I didn't sign my name. I simply sent all the evidence to the tax authorities. I included a brief cover letter explaining that I had become aware of this person's financial fraud and that I wanted them to investigate. I sent it by registered mail with return receipt. 2 weeks later, I received confirmation that the letter had been received. And I waited. I waited for the audit to begin. I waited for her to learn that her life was falling apart. I waited for her to realize that her greed, her lies, her cunning would not go unpunished. I didn't know how long it would take, but I was prepared to wait as long as necessary. For justice, I was ready to wait forever. During those weeks, I lived on edge. Every time the phone rang, my heart clenched. Every time the door opened, I thought the police had come. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I worried that my letter would be ignored, that my mother-in-law would find out about it, and about me. But I kept waiting. I repeated to myself that I had done the right thing, that I was defending myself, that I deserved justice. And I waited for karma to do its work, for the truth to prevail, for her to fall. And one fine day it happened. 3 months passed. 3 long, agonizing months during which I lived in tension like a person awaiting a verdict. I didn't know what would happen next, whether my letter would be acted upon, whether my mother-in-law would be arrested or just fined. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live in this state of uncertainty. I had to continue my life, work, raise my daughter, be a good wife. And I did. I smiled when I wanted to cry. I said everything's fine when everything inside was boiling. I waited for the tax authorities to act. And one ordinary Tuesday, as I was making dinner, the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Her voice was tense, even frightened. "Emily, I need to tell you something." A tax inspector came. He says I have problems with my reporting, that I have to pay a debt. I don't understand what's happening. Do you know who could have reported me? My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid she would hear it through the phone. I kept my voice steady and said, "No, I don't know. But if you have problems, maybe you should see a lawyer." She laughed nervously. "A lawyer? Why would I need a lawyer? I'll just pay whatever they say I owe. It's probably just a mistake." I said nothing. I knew it wasn't a mistake. I knew she owed far more than she could afford. I knew her life was about to change. And I was ready to watch. 2 weeks later, I learned that the tax authorities had imposed a fine of $150,000 on her. It was a huge sum, especially for a woman living on a pension and rental income. She couldn't pay it all at once. She tried to negotiate a payment plan, but she was refused. She was given 1 month to pay, or her property would be seized. I didn't gloat. I just felt the weight slowly lifting from my shoulders. She had gotten what she deserved, and I wasn't to blame. I had simply pressed the button that started the process. The law did the rest. My mother-in-law was in despair. She sold her car, her jewelry, even her furniture. But it wasn't enough. She had to sell her house. The very house she had lived in for 20 years. The house where she felt like a queen. The house where she had humiliated me. I learned about the sale from Mark. He said, "Mom is selling the house. I don't know what's happening to her. She looks lost." I didn't tell him I knew why. I just said, "Life can be unfair." He nodded, not understanding what I meant. But I knew this was justice. The house was put up for auction. I followed the process. I learned it would be sold at auction in a month. I knew I could participate. I had savings I had been putting aside for years. I wanted to buy that house, not because it was beautiful, but because it was a symbol of her power. I wanted her to know that the person she had hated now owned her home. I wanted her to feel what it was like to lose everything you had built. I didn't tell Mark about my plans. I wanted to do it myself. I wanted her to hear it from me. On auction day, I went to the hall. I sat among the other bidders modestly, unobtrusively. I didn't want to attract attention. I just waited for the bidding to begin. The price was low. No one wanted to buy an old house in that neighborhood. I made a bid. Another. When the hammer fell, I became the owner of my mother-in-law's house. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. I felt that I was finally in control of my life. I decided to move into that house. Not immediately, but after a few months, once I finished renovating it. I wanted it to become mine. I wanted her to see me there. I wanted her to understand that I was stronger than she had ever thought. A week after the purchase, I invited her for tea. She came. She looked old and tired. Her face was gray, her eyes empty. She sat at the table that had once been hers. I placed a cup of tea in front of her. She looked at me and said, "You did this. You bought my house. You reported me to the tax authorities." I didn't deny it. "Yes, I did," I said. "You thought I was weak. You thought I would endure your humiliation forever. But you were wrong. I didn't take revenge on you. I simply reclaimed what you stole from me. My dignity, my life, my freedom. You did this to yourself, Margaret. You stole from the state, you lied, you lived at others' expense. I just showed them the truth." She cried. She said, "Forgive me. I was selfish. I never thought about you. I just wanted to be happy." I looked at her and said, "I can't forgive you, but I'm not angry with you. I just won't be part of your life anymore. Go. Find your own path without me. I wish you peace, but not in my house." She left. I watched her walk out the door that was now mine. I felt neither gloating nor regret, only peace, the peace I had earned. I moved into that house a month later. I renovated it, rearranged the furniture, hung my own paintings. Now it was my home where I could be myself. My daughter came to visit and we laughed like we used to. My husband, who had initially opposed the purchase, now understood I had been right. He said, "You're strong, Emily. I never thought you were capable of this." I smiled. "I didn't want to be strong," I said. "I just wanted to be free." Sometimes I hear about my mother-in-law. She lives in social housing, in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. She has no money, no car, no friends. She's alone. I don't wish her harm. I just don't want to see her. I forgave her, but I didn't return to her. I can't be her savior because she was never my friend. I don't know what lesson this story holds. But I do know I'm no longer afraid to be myself. I'm no longer afraid to speak the truth. I'm no longer afraid to fight for my rights. I've come to understand that revenge isn't weakness. It's a way to protect yourself when you've lost everything. And sometimes the only way to survive is to strike back. Not with your fists, but through the law, through facts, through the system. I used the system to restore justice, and I don't regret it. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're being humiliated, used, broken, remember, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to a voice. You have the right to revenge if it helps you stay whole. Don't let anyone tell you that you must forgive. Forgiveness is your choice, not your obligation. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is simply walk away, or simply press the button that changes everything. I pressed that button, and I've never regretted it. Subscribe to the channel if you too believe that justice must prevail. Share in the comments how you've dealt with toxic relatives. It would mean a lot to know I'm not alone. Hit like if my story resonated with you. And remember, you are stronger than you think. Even when you feel broken, you can rise and win. That was my path. Could be yours too. Bye for now.